I believe I'm chairing this meeting. Mr. Shirley is unable to make it today, so I'm going to step in and chair the meeting. So without further ado, I'd like to call the September 19th Policy and Governance Committee meeting to order and call the roll. Ed Shirley, not here. Kyle Abercrombie, I'm here. Avery Gaddis, Michael Jefferson, Ojala Naeem, Shirley Skyers Thomas.
Present, I'm here.
Thank you. We also have with us our fearless leader, Chairwoman Comer. So I don't believe we have a quorum. Is that accurate? Okay, so we're not going to be able to vote on items 3, the minutes, items 4, the minutes, and we could just skip right to item 5. We won't be able to take any votes today without a quorum, but I think we can still have a conversation about the agenda items. So we're going to skip 5A and we're going to go right into 5B, which is expand workforce development opportunities beyond the cannabis industry. Christina, do you want to give us an overview?
Yeah, sure. So good morning, everyone. I hope you all received the email that I had sent out, which outlined the proposed concepts, and then I provided a background information on each of them. So one of the concepts that we did receive was to expand workforce development opportunities beyond the cannabis industry. And last session in the budget bill, Public Act 24-151, that bill gave the council the authority to expand workforce development opportunities beyond the cannabis industry. So I believe that we are good on that legislative language right now, and just wanted to open that up to any other council members if you have any other feedback.
No, sounds like it got covered last session, so we don't have
Yep.
to take any action. So that's great. Let's move on to, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Hearing none, let's move on to the next item. Mandate a report, 5C, mandated reporting requirement for the social equity and workforce development plans. Christina?
Yep. So this is one of the concepts that the council has been discussing for a while now. And this idea is that we would submit legislation that would require cannabis businesses to submit a 1-year impact report of their social equity and workforce development plans. We've talked in the past about tying this to the license renewal process, just as each of the businesses have to submit a social equity plan and a workforce development plan as part of the final license application. So I did want to open the floor to discussion. Perhaps Councilwoman Skyers Thomas can provide some further information. Don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, can we allow the conversation to continue, and then I will for sure jump in.
Yeah, I guess my only question is, do we have to do this statutorily, or is this something we could just incorporate in our, requirements or ask folks to do it?
So right now it is a policy, and we do ask cannabis businesses to submit a 1-year plan. It's just that it is not a requirement. So I can say I received some information from the staff, and we have received a total number of 55 social equity plans, and 3 cannabis businesses provided a 6-month progress report, and 1 submitted an annual report to us. So I know that this really is an important topic that we all feel very strongly about, and just want to know how we can, try to have enforcement of these plans, that to have the businesses take this seriously and understand that equity in this space is very important.
Chairwoman Comer.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So I think what would be helpful, as far as DCP, because the Department of Consumer Protection handles enforcement on a lot of other things. I think that's why we're sort of looking for some context from DCP. I know that from being there, in terms of having to build out a significant team in order to address the enforcement requirements that they were responsible for. So, any additional information that Councilwoman Skyers Thomas can provide sort of in that context, I think would be helpful for us in determining how we want to approach this. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we have our attorney on the line. So if you're all right, and Mr. Chair, if I can defer to our attorney to speak to that a little bit further. Is that okay?
Please. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
For
morning.
those of you who don't know me, I'm Julianne Avalone. I'm the General Counsel at Consumer Protection. So this issue has certainly been raised in the past. I think that when it comes to taking enforcement action against a credential, typically it's the agency that applies the standards related to a recommended revocation or suspension or any kind of fine that would proceed with the compliance meeting and then any hearing that would happen. Obviously, the Social Equity Council staff is small, so I don't know that that kind of procedure was contemplated for staff, again, dealing with kind of more enforcement issues. It is labor intensive. Like, I'm not going to lie, it's doing all of this procedure, creating an investigation report that explains kind of what they did, what the standards are. I think the concern would be from DCP is proceeding with some kind of enforcement that we have not investigated or created the standards for. And so, where there's going to be subjectivity, and these businesses are going to push back. And when there are issues of, usually you'll hear, well, you're treating so-and-so different than you're treating me. Then, the holder of those records and how the decisions were made, it makes it difficult for us to enforce the standards of another agency. So oftentimes you'll see, for example, in the prescriber world, that we'll hold the credential for someone to be able to issue controlled substance, to have a controlled substance license, but DPH oversees kind of the general conduct of the doctor. So there will be two separate proceedings, even though it's kind of on the same subject matter. I think there would have to be a lot more conversation about if there was going to be any kind of proceeding on DCP's part. There would have to be very, very clear standards in law of what exactly is required in a social equity plan. What exactly do they have to, or workforce development plan? Like what do they have to maintain at what time periods, and kind of like what are their appeal rights, which of that kind of gets to be a little bit easier. But I think it's what's the burden of proof for the Social Equity Council to meet, and figuring out also who in the Social Equity Council staff would be kind of responsible for investigating, who would be testifying at these hearings to be able to answer these questions. But the hard part is that then you're asking DCP, again, to prosecute cases on facts that they weren't part of, or any part of it. Usually we're working with our investigators to help develop the case, and it's our subject matter that we're experts in. So it may be a situation where, if you are going to do this, figuring out really what the bandwidth will be for the attorney on board. I mean, kind of stepping out of line for a second, your attorney is going to be super busy. Like there's a lot of work.
Wait, don't scare my legal person before she gets here.
She have a call? Oh,
No, no.
It's gonna be easy. It's gonna be a breeze. Don't worry about it. But I mean, so doing enforcement cases as well, then one of the ways that other agencies do it that have a smaller legal staff is in order to have your like prosecutor be separate from your hearing officer, that you can actually write into law that that you are allowed to use third-party hearing officers. And there are a number of people on contract, well, kind of on contract enough with the state that it's not a horrible procurement process to get them to work with you. But it has to be in legislation that you could do that to get the hearing officers. Otherwise, you have to go through the state contracting board, and there's going to be issues with union attorneys. So, we're happy to talk to you more about this, but it is setting it up properly. It makes most sense conceptually without looking at resources to have it at the Social Equity Council. But at the same time, we're walking into a year where there may not be a lot of extra funding to add FTEs. So
Exactly.
Christina?
Yes, I just had a question for Attorney Avalone. So can we, instead of enforcement, can we do like a requirement? So you know how currently the social equity, the plans and workforce development plans are a requirement for final licensure. Is there a way that instead of doing the enforcement, we can just say that this year plan is a requirement in the renewal process? Would that look different than kind of what you described, or?
But
No.
then, then the question is, if they give you something that you deem insufficient, then what? Because once they're issued the license, we can't automatically cancel it. They have a property right in that license. And so you have to go through the due process of trying to bring them into compliance, give them an opportunity to show evidence of compliance. Then if that doesn't work, go to a hearing. And so now, most of these cases settle because these are very valuable licenses. But there's always, whenever we're bringing an enforcement case, we always prepare for hearing, just in case.
Okay, Councilman Jefferson?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. When are licenses up for renewal, if at all?
So so they all are eligible for renewal once issued, and it's on an annual basis based on the date of issuance.
Is there any way we could tie the enforcement to just that? To the renewal?
At renewal? So as long as they submit something, because the problem is the sufficiency of the social equity plan, right? That's the problem. So if the application says you have to submit in a social equity plan that hits, these 3 categories, or these 6, however many, you want to put in there, and they write something in there, again, unless it's very specific, they really don't meet any, like some parts of those requirements, generally we accept it. They gave us the information, and now it's a matter of just, is it enough? So that subjectivity would require us to issue the license, and then then we could have the conversation of whether or not revocation or denial is appropriate.
What I'm asking is, can the legislation speak to a requirement for renewal that a social equity plan or workforce development plan is in place for renewal purposes?
Yes.
Yeah.
But again, the question is what's in that plan? So, because I think there are a lot of crafty ways to like meet minimum requirements or phrase something that they're doing in the community that may be sufficient on paper, although, you know, you may have additional information about either what's comparable in other communities or saying that, you know, we have some information that you really haven't been giving these donations to, you know, this local community center. So I think that the way to help make this a clearer enforcement is just making sure you're very specific in the legislation. Now, there's certainly, there may be a benefit to saying, you know, the requirements will be set forth in regulation and give the Social Equity Council the authority to do it through regulation. You know, it's a lengthy process to promulgate regulations. One of the amazing gifts that we've been given in the world of cannabis is this new legal mechanism of the policies and procedures, which can be implemented in, you know, prior to setting regulations. So that's certainly a way that you could do it. So you'd have a little bit more flexibility. And yet I certainly caution when we grant ourselves the authority to do policies and procedures, when the legislature grants us the authority to do policies and procedures, then it's a magic wand that we really should be very cautious with, because every time we make a change to policies and procedures or regulation, we really shift the sands under everyone's feet. And so we want to make as few changes as possible generally as the state of Connecticut so industry can adapt.
No, I get that. But you know, this is a new initiative, and I think if we're going to do something, we got to do it now, and it has to be based on language, and maybe that's something we need to spend our time on, creating something and putting the right language together, because without it, we're just dealing with an honor system, and we all know how that's going to go, and subjectivity, and it's not going to work. It simply isn't. So we have to rely on language, and we have to put it in the legislation, and we got to just do the best we can, and then see, you know, what happens from there. And there are going to be challenges, but the fact of the matter is we have to lay out something, and we have to be very specific about what we're looking for. And I think we know what we're looking for.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson. Executive Director McGee.
Yeah, through you, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think what Michael, Councilor Jefferson, what you were saying is definitely poignant. And also Attorney Avalon, you make a valid point in that we've got to allow time for this industry to get used to the regulations that we currently have in place. And having said that, you know, the enforcement is a strong word, but it's a word that we're going to use for this conversation, and making sure these applicants, they remain true to what they said in their plan, which then it really creates a deeper conversation internally with our team to take a harder look at our social equity and workforce development plans in terms of our criteriums, and being very clear on what we're asking of them. So I'm saying that out loud for the world to hear. We're really investigating, researching to tighten up on our expectations that's driven by statute and the collective minds on our council in terms of what it is that we're asking for to remain true to our equity moral value within the work that we do. So I think these conversations are important because they will then inform whatever the recommendations might be. But this is a start of a continued conversation. And I think the more we really go there and talk through this, the better we are prepared for the ledge session. So anyway, I just felt the need to say that we're internally looking at our criterion, our rubrics, and making sure that it's less subjective and more objective and in line with the statute and regulations before us.
Thank you, sir. Chairwoman Comer.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if it makes sense to ask the Office of Fiscal Analysis about cost in terms of adding personnel, because I think if we are going to put in language that creates some sort of enforcement, again, I know DCP had to staff up significantly for that purpose. So it might be worth, if not going through OFA, then perhaps looking to see if other states do have a similar enforcement mechanism and what that looks like. Because what I don't want to do is put language in that says we're going to enforce this and then we don't have the bandwidth to do so. I think I just want us to be mindful of the personnel it will take to actually execute this with fidelity. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Skyers Thomas.
Thank you. Just to echo some of the sentiment, I definitely do agree that to be able to staff this properly would be ideal. Because if we're going to go through and be really specific on how to operationalize this, I think we definitely need to talk about the staffing aspect. So I just wanted to echo that and underscore it. I agree.
Thank you. So it's go ahead, Julianne.
Sorry, just not to seem like I'm, talking out of two sides of my mouth. But of course, my job is to look at the different perspectives of it. One thing that I would caution is that when you also are talking about making sure that the language is prescriptive enough that you have very clear standards for when there's acceptance or denial, and when we're saying that there's, again, non-compliance for insufficiency. One of the complicated things in this area is that not all licensees are created equal, right? When you're going to have these large multi-state corporations coming in as cultivators, you're going to have smaller micro cultivators, you're going to have product packagers that have different bottom lines. And so saying that, every year you have to give $500,000 to a local charity might be fine if you're a large multi-state entity, but not if you're a small product packager or a delivery company. So as much as sometimes prescriptive standards really help with enforcement, they don't always accommodate the individuals who are actually running these businesses and how they can allocate their resources.
Thank you. Okay. Well, it sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement that we want to make sure there's accountability in this system, and the way to get there is a little complicated and may require additional time and resources to figure out. So we're not voting on anything today, but I would encourage the Social Equity Council staff to continue these conversations. I know we have a firm deadline of October 1, but the conversation will have to continue after that date, unfortunately. So any other questions or comments on this item?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chair.
Go for it.
Just through you, I would just recommend to the executive director that whoever works on the language, maybe we should consider, just echoing the sentiments of the comments of Attorney Avalon, that we might look to create tiers for the licensees, so that you have a tier 1 licensee that's a large operator versus a tier 3 operator that might be a small operator, and then we can link the expectation to the various tiers in terms of what their social equity plan or workforce development plan should look like. That's just something that you might want to consider.
Duly noted.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that idea. Great. Do we have a quorum?
We now do.
Okay, let's go back to item 3. Can I have a motion to approve the June 20th, 2024 meeting minutes?
So move.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. We're going to move to item 4. Can I have a motion to approve the June 21st, 2024 special meeting minutes?
So move.
Second? Can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Abstentions? Okay, sounds like both passed. Any further conversations on workforce development or the social equity workforce development plans? Hearing none. Anything for the good of the order? Chairwoman Comer.
Thank you. And this is, I would say this is for the good of the order, just because it wasn't sort of discussed before, but when Executive Director McGee and I were at the Together We Grow conference last week, was it last? I think it was last week.
Yeah.
Um,
Feels like
thank
all
you.
these weeks are kind of.
Yeah, for sure. One of our licensees who has a transporter license raised the issue of some of the requirements in terms of how long they can maintain a product on their vehicle. The concern was that there are some things that can't be prevented, like acts of nature, or weather storms. And so wondering, I know that the indication was that they plan to bring this forward to the legislature. So I just wanted to flag that. I know I have a brochure. I don't know if Executive Director McGee got one as well, but we can pass that on to Christina just for awareness, and share it as well with the members of the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for flagging that. I'll ask Christina to keep an eye out this session, and we can decide how to handle that type of legislation as it comes. Executive Director McGee.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. And for to that point, what we'll do is we'll PDF it so that this group will have a copy of it and they can see it and read it. And one of the things that myself, Christina, in partnership with the council, will be doing is establishing a strategic legislative outreach plan so that we can meet with our elected body and have these conversations with them so that these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. Again, we will not move without this body, which is why we're going through this process. But I'll be sure to get the information and my notes from Grow Together to this body so that you can review it.
Excellent. Anything else for the good of the order? Okay. Well, I would just like to thank everyone for allowing me to chair this committee. And I had big shoes to fill with Mr. Shirley's absence, but I am honored to be here and I appreciate it. So can I have a motion for adjournment?
So move.
Second.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend, you all.
Take care.
Take
All
care.
right. Thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
Yes.